Welcome to The Unspoken Truth. I'm your host, Rob Russ.
And I'm Ed Anderson.
G'day, Ed. How you doing, mate?
I'm living the dream, Robbie. How about you?
Oh, very well, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time here, welcome. It's great to have you here. And if you're back for more, welcome back. And thank you for your ongoing support. This is The Unspoken Truth, where Ed and I go behind the narrative, behind the stories that the mainstream media are presenting you. And we like to give you a little bit of a heads up and give you a bit of a leading indicator of what might be going on and what it all means when you're looking at this craziness in this mad world that we all seem to reside in. Today, we're going to be talking about fake news media. We're going to show you how they only seem to be showing you their narrative and then finding the facts to support that narrative. Why is it that there's always an agenda? We're going to discuss that and what it is that you can do about it. Let's get started. All right, Ed, I want to kick off the show today by saying good choice of topics. I really like this topic, and I want to begin before we dive into your report here, and just let me know if I'm stepping on any of your territory as I go along here. The reason I wanted to kick off, I got a couple of slides here. The problem that we have with fake news media, and I remember Donald Trump standing up at a press conference saying, calling people to ask him questions and go, not you, you're fake news, fake news, fake news. And I remember seeing that and just thinking, what is he talking about? Like, why is he so aggressive towards these people? Like, they're just there asking questions, and why doesn't he like that? And it was really only then that I recognized that those people were spinning what he was saying and turning it into something else. And I never really thought of it as fake news. I always thought of it as just spin, because these people will say anything that they need to say in order to get the click. Because a lot of people don't realize how modern day media works online. Eyeballs and clicks are the currency of modern media companies. And the more clicks you get, the more ad impressions you get, the more revenue that you actually get. So they'll say and do anything that they can in order to actually get your attention. And the problem with fake news media is that it's embedded with real truth. So I came across this article just the other day. I sent this to you yesterday, and it says SNP, Scotland National Power, I think that's what it is, admits to felling 16 million trees to develop wind farms. So they're telling us about green energy and why green energy is the solution to everybody's problems and why they're going to fix the world with wind turbines and solar power. But just look at the weather there. The wind's not really blowing, and it's very dark and grey and gloomy in Scotland. The sun's certainly not shining. They can't do very well with solar panels there. But what they're doing here is they're telling you the truth. So they did cut down 16 million trees, and they admitted it, and they're telling you the truth. But then on the same day, you see another story that looks like this. In Paris, they're saying the media is reporting that the temperature is 42 degrees Celsius, but they put a sign showing you that it's 32 degrees Celsius. So there's a 10 degree difference, which is a lot when you're hot in summertime in Paris and you run around the middle of the day. 10 degrees, the difference between 40 degrees and 30 degrees is vast. And that's the problem that we face with this mainstream media and this fake news, is that they have a narrative. And I see it often. I see it a couple of times a week, actually. What I call it a slow news day. I don't know if you've seen it. You might not see it the same way I do, Ed. When I'm in the gym, sometimes when I'm doing a warm-up or I finish my workout on the cardio machines, there's like 6 screens in front of me. There's Channel 9, there's Channel 7, there's ABC, there's Channel 10, and there's SBS. And they usually have a different channel on all of the screens, and sometimes they have different things on there, right? But if you watch the news between, like the morning shows between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., sometimes I'm sitting on the exercise bike for an hour, and I happen to be there at that time. When I see Channel 9 news and I see Channel 7 news juxtaposed next to each other at exactly the same time, they're running the same stories at exactly the same time. And sometimes you look up at the screen and you go, isn't that what they're talking about on that one? Yeah, and they're both talking about the same story at the same time. And the reporters are in the same locations. And it's like, surprisingly, that they're not in the background of each other's reports. And that really highlights to me, and if I look over 2 screens over there and I see the news on Channel 10 first thing in the morning, I can see that same story there. So across the 3 mainstream channels that we have here in Australia that most people get their stuff from in free-to-air television, I'm seeing the same story perpetuated at exactly the same time. So is that fake news, or is that just the news, the people that control the news, like the person who curates the news and decides what are we going to put on TV, what are we going to report? Is that them all coming together to talk about the same things, or is that some narrative? Is something happening behind the scenes? I often think that it's a bit nefarious, but then sometimes I think, well, it's a slow news day. So what else are they going to report on? That's the only real story that's actually happening. So it's no surprise that they're all doing that. And I find myself making excuses for it. But I don't know how to handle it. Have you ever seen anything like that? Or you got a lot more channels there in America. That's the difference, I suppose.
Well, I see it all the time.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I mean, there's no point. I mean, why bother choosing? Just if you're going to watch a news station in the mainstream media, just pick one and you're all set. Because you're not going to get any better coverage or different coverage on another network. There are gatekeepers of news in the industry, right? And they obviously don't appear at the local desk. They're higher up, because that's the only way you can get this kind of cooperation between so many different outlets at the same time. Is this source has to be far up the corporate chain, where decisions are made about which topics to cover and what the take is going to be on that topic. And in many, and you're going to see in the report that I did, is the wording is exact. It's right down to the exact wording on multiple different sources. So there is collusion going on in that regard. There's actual collusion going on. And someday there's going to be a movie made, or there's going to be an expose book by the executive, spilling the beans on who exactly is like the main gatekeeper. Is it a group of guys? I don't know. Anyway, but it's kind of
that's me making excuses. Yesterday there was a tragic event in Auckland in New Zealand. There was a mass shooting, and so some guy went to a construction site with a shotgun and started shooting people. The cops went there, and then they put the guy down, right? But when you look across all of the screens that I was looking at, it's the same story all at the same time. And then when I look at my phone, I see it all in my YouTube all at the same time. And there's nobody driving that story. That's just breaking news.
Oh, yeah.
And these news outlets are diving on it, and they're jumping on it like that. And that's what I'm saying is the problem, right? Is there's elements of truth amongst all of that. That is true. That is really going on right now. That is really happening. But then I find myself on a slow news day making excuses for them, saying, how can they all have the same story in the same time slot? And they're saying pretty much the same thing, because I can read the subtitles on the screens, and they're saying, and is that the reporters just reporting the facts of the matter that are actually there? Well, maybe, yeah, that definitely is the case, because you can only report the story one way. But why is it that all of them are showing it all at the same time? Like, do you really think that there's something behind that, Ed?
Well, okay, I will give them if there's a breaking news event like that, of course everyone's going to cover it. So that's a gimme. That's all right. I'll give you that. When you have such an important topic going on that is timely, it's going on in real time, in essence, okay, you can see why everyone would. But it's when that a particular topic has been chosen to be talked about, and they're all doing it at the same time. Okay, that's where I
smell a rat.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we throw to your report, I was looking at my Twitter feed just as we were kicking off here, just catching up, and there was Robert F. Kennedy's in front of a Senate hearing, and it's I couldn't pull the video out here because it's just too spicy to show on YouTube, so I'll just leave it in Twitter. And if you want to find it, you can find it. It's all over Twitter at the moment. It's trending right now. So, but what happened was one of the senators was trying to censor him, and she's passing a motion there within the committee hearing to silence him because apparently he'd been out there making anti-Semitic remarks, and he'd been saying all of these things. But he defended himself properly, and he's a lawyer, so he's used to being in these circumstances. He's used to people trying to debunk what it is that he's saying, and he's ready for these things. But he doesn't really need to be ready because he's got the truth on his side. And he's just coming from a position of, and he just says, everything that you just accused me of, I never said any of that. I never said any of that. And so this woman who is making these accusations of Robert F. Kennedy in a public hearing on a public record, where there are real-time ramifications for somebody who's running for president of the United States, is making accusations of somebody based on mainstream media. But the mainstream media, according to RFK, is completely incorrect. I never said that. There's no evidence of me saying that. There's evidence of me saying those little snippets of words, and then they've stitched those words together with other kind of implications that I've said that. But it's just not true. Nobody nobody I know would speak like that. Nobody I know that I hang out with says those remarks or says those things. I've never said those things. And then, so you see him defending himself, but then I also look at that woman who's actually out there saying, you're saying this, you're doing this, you're behaving like that. Where is she getting her information from? And it always comes down to that Ronald Reagan phrase, do you trust the Soviets? Well, yeah, I trust them, but I'm going to verify what it is that they do. So you got to trust, but verify. And the way you can verify in media with open source intelligence is just by cross-referencing 5 or 6 different pieces of information. And, once upon a time when somebody said that they did their own research, you go, okay, cool, what were you reading? But today, if you say, oh, I did my own research, all of these lefties just roll their eyes and go, oh my God, he's another conspiracy theorist. Now, hang on a minute. All I've done is I've looked at the story, whatever is being perpetuated, and I've looked across 10 different platforms and I've got 10 different ideas about what that is. And I'm just using my critical thinking to bring it all together to try and sum it up, to form my own opinion about it. That's really what this show is about, is by looking at all of those different places to find what the real unspoken truth is behind the story. And this woman gets in front of a Senate committee and is perpetuating whatever is in the media that got the clicks to get that to happen. RFK is trending in America on all sorts of platforms, and people will go out there and say whatever they have to say about him and make up stories about him to get eyeballs on their content because they get more ad revenue when that actually happens. So the motivation to actually do something and to slur somebody and smear somebody like that is well-founded for that very reason. So,
okay, well, so whenever they have these committee hearings and they have people testifying, and the congressman or senator is lying about things, whatever the subject matter is, they have an agenda, because all these people, they have staff members, and when you're going to do a committee meeting, you're going to prepare for it. You say, all right, I want to ask these questions. And so I need research. I want, you, Missy, and you, Mister, you're my interns from Harvard. I want you to research that topic, come up with some questions, and give me, research the question. So they have no excuse for not doing research. They have no excuse for taking as their source a mainstream media news report. That's no excuse.
But I can also see how they would make an error, right? So Senator X says to their interns, go and do the research on this and prepare, because I read some stuff about RFK that was A, B, and C. Can you verify that? So they go to CNN, They go to NBC, they just go to New York Post, Washington Post. They go to the places that you would typically think, well, I Google it, and they appear at the top of Google. Google's telling me that these are the actual facts of the matter. But the truth is, those interns hand off that information to that senator or whomever is making those accusations, but they haven't been able to verify it themselves. Because, and the other thing is, right, the other thing is it comes back to this. There's a little bit of truth in what the media is saying. So, well, that's a reputable website, that's the Telegraph. But then the Telegraph in the same, gives you something like that, and you're like, so what do you believe? How do you actually verify it? And in some ways, it's pretty embarrassing that this woman's going after RFK in a public hearing and saying those things, and he's sitting on the other side of it, just going, "Oh my God, are you serious? I just didn't say any of that stuff. Like, why would I? I'm running for president of the United States. Why would I make anti-Semitic remarks? What planet are you on? Why would you think that I would say that?" And the reason she thinks that you said that is because I found that in all of these sources over here that you said that you were doing that. And he's like, but I didn't say any of that. It's just not true. Otherwise known as trial by media.
Yeah. Well, speaking as a world-class journalist myself, I would tell you, whenever people watch my reports, there's a reason why I'm always throwing up, snippets from the articles that support what I'm saying, right? I always support what I'm saying. I show my sources, so people can hold me to it. So they don't have to just think, well, Ed just made this up. He just pulled it out of thin air. No, I source it. I source my material, and I put it on air. And that's not difficult. If you're going to be making, if you're going to be reporting on a subject and you're going to promote a certain conclusion, show the proof. Throw up a snippet. Well, here is the quote from so-and-so, with his name at the bottom, in the signature style. There it is, black and white. Show the evidence. Show evidence. instead of just saying, I heard someone say once that you called someone an anti-Semite. You called someone, show me the clip. Show me the article. Show me. And that's why, the best books you'll ever find on serious topics are books where a third to half of the book is all bookmarks. They're all,
references.
Material. Right. Yeah. Those are the things you can trust because they're based in them. They show you the material that they use to base a report on. When you have people with little to no bookmarks, that's a person you want to be skeptical about. So,
yeah, by the way, the RFK book called The Real Anthony Fauci does exactly that. There's like probably 30 pages of glossary and like to explain the terminology, but also all of the reference material. And he put that book out and it was completely censored, completely. And it became a bestseller anyway, in spite of all of that. But no one has ever been able to debunk the guy. No one's ever been able to say, well, this bit here you're saying is just not actually true and here's the reason why. Nobody has ever come after any fact that he said in there. So is that because nobody can do that, or the people that have tried to do that have tried and failed and gone, oh, well, maybe he's right, we're just got to leave that there and just hope that not that many people actually see it? So when I think of RFK and his reputation and how he actually does things, and that very book, I'm more likely to believe him. I'm more inclined to believe him when he said, well, I didn't say that. Why would you believe all of these random people in the media when I'm sitting right here in front of you? And I think the way to actually do it on the subject of books, there's a great book out there called Never Split the Difference. And I've mentioned this a couple of times on the podcast we've done over the years. And it's written by an FBI negotiator named Chris Voss. And essentially, the concept of never split the difference is what you're doing is you're just asking how. So so he was an FBI negotiator. So if the bank robber goes into the bank and he kicks in the door and he's got 30 people hostage and he makes a demand, they get on the phone and he makes a demand, right, I want a bus, I want a helicopter, and I want a plane. And so the idea of never split the difference is to say, well, what sort of bus do you want? Do you want a 12-seater? Do you want a 24-seater, a 72-seater? Do you want that to be with a driver? Do you want one of us police officers to drive it? You're just asking how. Okay, you want a helicopter as well. What sort of helicopter? Do you want an AW139? Do you want a 206? Do you want a turbine? Do you want a piston helicopter? Do you want 4 people, 9 people, 10 people? How many people? So you're just asking a series of questions of how. And when somebody's making the demands, they haven't really thought that far about how to execute. And even if they have thought all the way through on how to do that, the chances of them actually being able to negotiate their way to what they want is reducing significantly, because when the hostage negotiator says, how do you want me to do that? Then the actual bad guy has to actually give you something back. And all of a sudden you're in this back and forth, and the psychology of it kind of actually leans towards the negotiator more than it does to the bad guy. And so when I think about it in media here, if I see fake news media, I always ask myself, not how, because you're not actually doing something, but I'm like, where and who? Is that really true? So when you apply that to your life, you can quickly see through all of the BS that's actually out there. And when you look at a mainstream media story, you look at it and you go, why are they saying that? Why would they do that? This is why. And it always comes back to the worldwide flu, right? At first I was psyoped like everybody. Oh my God, this is really serious. And then when I start listening closely to what they're saying, I'm thinking, you've never tried to protect me before from something like this. Why are you trying to keep me safe now? I'm already safe. We live in a very safe society. It's very calm and very safe here. Why are you trying to keep me safe? Why are these health people telling me that they're trying to keep me safe? Are they trying to control me? Or they trying to control? Yes, they're trying to control my behavior. And that's how I kind of got to that point. And, I've got Chris Voss to thank for that, by just being able to ask that question, like how and why and what is it that they're really saying? Why are they trying to do that? Anyway, it's a really, really great book. Everybody should listen to that book and read that book.
That book, we're talking about how to negotiate with the terrorists, is a great gift idea for any guy who's getting married.
Want to go out for dinner? How?
Yeah.
How? You want to eat steak? Why? How?
Yeah.
Never split the difference, man. Never split the difference. All right, you've got a little report for us. Let's take a little look at that.
Today, more than ever, you have to be a discerning consumer of news, because there is hypocrisy everywhere. So let's talk about it. Okay, so listen, I always endeavor to tell you the truth and to bring you information that you're not getting in other places. So because of that, I do often wander into some controversial territory. And there are some powers out there that want to control the narrative in America so that you are brainwashed. So as these elites out there are preaching to you about, fake news, they are at the same time selling their own narrative. Now, I'm going to show you a clip here that illustrates my point. I wish I knew who made this clip, who put it together, because it's an amazing piece of work. They must have put a lot of man hours into this. But this clip has gone viral on the internet. And at this point, I don't think anyone's really sure who is the originator of this clip. But whoever you are out there, if you're watching this, hey, good job, man. So let's take a look.
I am Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about one-sided news stories
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 So, I just want to make the point that you need to be discerning about who you get your information from. I hope that you find the information that you get here valuable. And if you do, please subscribe and please hit that like button. Ed Anderson, live from Minnesota, signing out.
Man, oh man, that's that's funny as hell, right? I've seen versions of that. There's a couple of different versions of that, actually. I've never seen that one before, which is really good. I was wondering what you were going to show us here today. You know what? You know how I describe those people? And I feel a bit sorry for them, man. But the way you describe them is they're useful idiots, right? So they've got a job to do. They go on TV. They've got a career to support. They're journalists. They finally made it as an anchor. They made it to that position, and they just don't know. Without realizing they don't know they're an instrument of deep state. And that's why, to your point, I think you described it really well, Ed. You said you have to be discerning where you get your media from. And those people are not doing something. I don't believe that they're part of deep state. I don't believe that they're bad people, because if you spoke to them individually, they're just being normal, regular people, but they don't realize how they're being used as an instrument like that.
Well, these anchor people, they're not journalists, right? They're
presenters.
They got the job because they can speak well, because they can read what's in front of them. They can read the teleprompter. That's how they got the job. And most of them obviously didn't get the job because they're good looking. That's why those guys are on the local media, not the national media, right? But is kind of breathtaking when you see the scale at which all these news stations around the country get the same script verbatim. I mean, right down to the patter, right? And it's
and the pacing when they say, right, this is a threat to democracy, and when he lines them all up like that, and then they all say it in unison like that, you're like, is that being manipulated? No, that's actually how it is.
Yeah, well, it's in the script. It's in the words in front of them. It's like, whenever I'm watching a movie with my son, he says something like, come on, why would he do that? That's so stupid. My answer is, well, it was in the script, When
you're screaming at the TV, right, like shouting like Grandpa Simpson, why are they telling me to do that? What's going on? Yeah. That's actually part of the script. You said something really good before we hit the record button, and I just want to pull on that thread a little bit. It's like they have a narrative to begin with, and then they go away and find the facts to actually suit the narrative.
Yeah, and that's the difference between an actual journalist and someone with an agenda. A journalist, he's a fact finder. He's looking for the breadcrumbs, and he follows the breadcrumbs, and then comes to a conclusion at the end of that journey. But the deep state and the powers that be, people who want to influence our thinking, they flip it, right? They search for little snippets of fact, like you said, the article you showed earlier. There is some truth in that article, but just enough to paint their narrative. But they won't tell you the other side of the story. Right. So
they're telling you some truth to let you know, hey, don't forget we're journalists, and sometimes we do tell the truth. One of the really interesting things in my consumption, and I'm mindful of the things that I consume, in my downtime as well, because I like to be entertained, and I like to sit down and relax and watch a TV show or something like that. Just like everybody, right? I like to do that, but I'm mindful of the consumption. But the thing that I find myself being drawn to, so yesterday, I'll give you an example. I turned on Netflix, and there is Black Adam. So The Rock himself, right? And, The Rock is a pretty charismatic character. He's made a lot of good movies. He's made a few terrible ones. And I didn't know anything about this movie. And I turned it on, and I turned it off within probably 8 minutes. It was terrible. And I thought to myself, why is it that I didn't like that? Then I found myself scrolling through Netflix, like, what else is there to watch? And the thing that I gravitate to the most is investigative journalism. So in Netflix, they call them docuseries, right? So it's a documentary, but it's kind of, you're telling a story, whether it's a crime story, a true crime story. There's a really good one about, there's a whole bunch of Egyptian archaeologists, and they find these new tombs, and he's trying to find this new pyramid, and the story follows them through, their season, which only goes for 9 months in the desert, and they're digging in the ground, finding all these artifacts, and they're really factual. There was another one that I saw where I was watching a little bit yesterday. It was a bit boring. It was a bit slow, but I kind of it got to the point for me in about 20 minutes, and I switched it off there. But it was, again, these archaeologists digging in a cave, and they found these skeletal remains from 250,000 years ago. And it's really interesting how they're putting the story back together of who they are, and how they hypothesize how they would have been based on their bone structure and stuff. And, it's this science research-based thing that these really smart people are trying to put together. And, what does it all mean? Like, who really cares? Like, why does that matter? Well, I want to be entertained. I like a little bit of downtime. It's interesting to see what other people do. But the minute I put on a Hollywood movie like Black Adam, I get, ugh, that's terrible. And I think I gravitate to longer form docuserie type content because I understand how hard it is to research those things, and how hard it is to weave a narrative of stories together. So think about in media, when you look at something like 60 Minutes, that's some old school investigative reporting. When you and me were growing up, 60 Minutes would, they'd have these stories that go for 25 or 30 minutes in these extended interviews or the B-roll, and they're weaving a story into it. And these days, those types of news programs are masterpieces of journalism. But sometimes when you watch them, they can be a little bit driven by narrative as well, especially if they come from mainstream. And that's the danger of it, right? We get a soundbite of 30 seconds on a news report, but in 60 Minutes, we get 30 minutes of a narrative being perpetuated. And because it's a masterpiece of production, and it's a masterpiece of storytelling, it's easy for you to be kind of led all the way down that path and sucked all the way into that story. And, that's a good thing. You should be entertained by those things, and you should enjoy those things. But it always comes back to Ronnie Reagan, yeah? Trust, but verify. You got to trust, but verify. And when I'll close my thought with this one, Ed. When I look at my Telegram channel and I look at the war and what's happening in Ukraine, I get a completely different story to what's actually happening on the ground, because I'm seeing footage of people with their phones, with their GoPros. I'm seeing soldiers running into trenches, fighting each other at, close quarters combat, 1 meter away from each other type thing. It's surprising they don't have bayonets fixed to their rifles because they're that close to each other. I know Australian soldiers wouldn't get into close quarters fighting without fixing a bayonet like that, but the Ukrainians are not doing that, mostly because they've got silencers on their weapons, right? But if they didn't, then that's actually what you'd be seeing. But you don't see any of that in mainstream media. You see a little bit of it on YouTube. It's highly, highly curated and highly censored. But the vast majority of content that you see from the front lines in Ukraine is not available in mainstream. And I think you've said it a couple of times, when you look at the Telegram channel that we have, some of the content there is just brutal. And that's not the half of it. I watch, I don't know, maybe half an hour a day of that stuff as I scroll through the different channels. And what I'm trying to do is I'm looking at what mainstream media are saying. What are they saying about the front lines? What are they saying about Zaporizhzhia? Where is the counteroffensive? What's happening? There's always these reports of America is giving this much more money. Europe's supporting with this much money. They're doing this, they're doing that. Then you look at the front lines and the footage from the front lines from a couple of days ago and you go, well, none of that is reflective of what the geopolitical situation is. And the people on the front lines are just getting slaughtered at scale. And the people that are coming back from the front lines, when they're being interviewed, they're like, whatever you do, don't come here. Whatever you do, don't go to the front here. There's dead Ukrainians everywhere and there's dead Russians everywhere and everybody is killing each other at close range. It is horrendous. I can't believe I survived. And that's the real story on the ground. And when you look at those channels, that's the real story. But all you hear about is Russia pulled out of the grain deal. But actually, you don't see what's been perpetuated on the ground by NATO, by us, by everybody else that are supporting them. It's just bullshit. It's a lie.
Yeah, so Russia pulled out of the grain deal, and they have some stock footage of
a ship
being loaded with grain. Well, that footage, from the Telegram channel that you talked about, that's in the old days. That's what they would call raw footage, right?
Yes.
That's raw footage, and you can't always trust raw footage because sometimes it could be misleading, right? That raw footage might just tell, half the story. Maybe those guys an hour later was doing something really bad to the other guy, so that's why it's important to dig and dig and dig. And I think journalists have to show a little humility and understand that there are going to be times when they get it wrong. There are going to be times when they come to the wrong conclusion, that they do get it wrong. When was the last time you heard a news station or a journalist apologize because he got his reporting wrong?
Actually, yesterday.
Really?
Surprisingly, I'm glad you raised that. Yeah, there was it was on Piers Morgan Uncensored. So he interviewed this guy. He's a British journalist. I can't remember his name, but it was after the fall of Afghanistan. He went back to Kabul and he's reporting. He's going, look, all the checkpoints are gone. It's calm. There's no crime. Everyone's okay. It's an authoritarian government. And he's giving you this really positive perspective that now there's no more war. Nobody's killing each other anymore. It's okay. But what he doesn't show you is the mindless repression of the Taliban and how horrendous they actually are and how they execute people in the street and all the really bad stuff. He just kind of left that out of the report. And then Piers Morgan had him on the show. And, the first thing he did was he ate a giant piece of humble pie and he goes, on reflection, I shouldn't have done that, or I should have had a more balanced report and said, look, all the good things that are happening, but all of these bad things are still happening. He didn't do that. He just said, look at all these good things. We should have left there a long time ago. And yeah, sure, we shouldn't be in some other country occupying them, but he definitely did eat a piece of humble pie. But you're quite right. Beyond that, that's just an individual, right? We haven't had an apology from a politician, a health minister, a mainstream news outlet.
Careful.
Yeah, well, we haven't. There's the electric fence. I'm going near it, right? I'm going near it. One of the things that when I look at the media about the war in Ukraine just in the last week, one of the things that's come out is we're going to give them cluster munitions, and so we've heard that, right? We're going to give them cluster munitions. That's what they said, and we reported on that. And they didn't. When we reported on it, they didn't say what that was actually going to be. And I joined the dots and thought F-16 training. They're going to get them cluster munitions, and that's the fastest way for airstrikes to take out those positions and to do that. But it came out shortly after we'd done that report, and they said, here's the artillery rounds that we're going to give to you that have cluster munitions in them. And literally within a day, they're like, yeah, we've got them already. And they're showing pictures of them. It's like, you said you were going to give them to them, but now they're already there. So which one is it? You've already given them to them, or you're going to give them to them? I couldn't decide. And just now, before I logged on here with you, I was looking in my Telegram channel, and there's the first shots of cluster munitions you can see on the battlefield. And they're already using them. So we've gone from, we're thinking about giving them to them, we're going to give it to them, to literally a couple of days later, to it actually being on the battlefield being used. And I think, man, oh man, this is just, we're going to give them F-16s. Do they already have them? Are the pilots already trained? Are they in the last couple of weeks of their training? This is, they'll tell you what you want to hear based on their narrative. And then, as you say, they'll find the facts, and they'll cherry pick the bits and pieces of that to suit their narrative.
Well, I've got a theory on that. I'd like to get your opinion on it. Okay, so my theory is they probably gave him a bunch of really nasty weaponry. Say, just go ahead and use it. But then when they saw all this footage coming from the front line and it's starting to leak out that is being documented, which stuff is going to be used, now they're saying, hey, man, we better get ahead of this because and then say, so we're going to say we're going to give it to them, and we'll just tell the guy, all right, don't use it for at least a week, all right? Because, we have to get it, quote, get it to you, right?
They're like 2 days later, they're using it.
Some guy wasn't listening. He couldn't wait and he used it anyway. I don't know.
I did see something that was quite alarming in relation to that as well. But you wouldn't see this in mainstream media, folks. You would only see this if you were following the stories and you're listening to the mainstream narrative, but then you see what's actually happening in the real world from just normal people that don't have an agenda. Somebody with their mobile phone doesn't have an agenda. They're taking a photo, they've got some footage, and they put it up and they share it with the networks that they actually have. So I saw some comments from Zaluzhny, who's the commander of the Ukrainian forces, saying, "I'm going to take back Crimea and nobody can stop me." And I thought to myself, at what point is this actually going to escalate to something? And then they blew the bridge up again the other day. Are they going to blow the bridge up again and they're going to cut them off, and then the counteroffensive starts and they go down there, and then the Russians, it's an existential threat? We've talked about all of these things, and the rhetoric that's coming from the individual in charge is not reported. So I looked in mainstream media because I took the comments that he actually said and I pasted them into Google. And the other thing is that you don't realize is that Google is also suppressing you. So Google is suppressing given stories, and sometimes that's very, very apparent. Very apparent when you Google something, you search for it, and it's on like page 10, or you scroll for like 2 meters on your screen before you actually see something like that. But that's the truth there. And the other stories that are at the top of Google are what's perpetuated, because most people don't go past the first page of Google, right?
Yeah. Well, I purposely do not Google many things on Google. I purposely do not, especially certain topics. I don't want to Google it, even though I'm just doing research. I don't want the power to be to know, oh, that guy just asked about that topic and then puts me in the crosshair. They do it. They keep track. So, this movie that just came out with Jim Caviezel, there's no way I would Google that subject matter.
No, ever.
Man.
No. You know where you get information around that is go listen to all the podcasts with Tim Ballard and stuff.
Yeah,
and get it directly from the people that are on the front lines of it, are doing it. Andy Stumpf does a really good podcast with a guy who deals with people trafficking and that as well, like human trafficking. So those people do the rounds on those ex-military podcasts, right? So yeah, they're really good. If there's alternative sources, right? You can always find those alternative sources.
Yeah, and we do have to be a little creative in talking about those kind of controversial topics, right? We got to use code words, and we got to we have to have faith that our audience is smart and they can read between the lines. And but I was going to do a segment on that topic, and I decided not to, just because it's I run the risk. Listen. I'm a free speech guy, as you know. I think I should be free to talk about anything that I want at all, short of promoting violence.
Yeah, you don't want to incite violence.
Short of that, I should be allowed to talk about anything that I want. But the truth is that there are some areas that if I kind of veer into them, I have a chance of being deplatformed, and then I won't get a chance to talk to you guys about anything. So I've got to make tough choices along the way. We both do. We both have to make tough choices, and very rarely does a week go by where Rob doesn't put the fear of God in me. Because he has less fear in that regard. He'll
I just go, whatever, man. We'll just go to Telegram and do it on Twitter, or we'll do it somewhere else like that. Yeah. So let's finish off with this final question, and I'll let you go. I'll go first, so I'll give you a chance to kind of collect your thoughts about it. So, how is it that when you look at mainstream media, how is it that you as an individual don't become an instrument of the deep state? because we all want to get our news from somewhere. We get it from social media. If you're a young person, you probably get it from TikTok. You probably get it from Snapchat, for heaven's sake. Like, I'm not on TikTok and I'm not on Snapchat. I don't know what's going on over there. What are they actually saying? But for me, as an individual, the way that I select a story here that we're talking about on the Unspoken Truth is I generally look at something that might be a day or two old. And I don't really have an opinion or formulate a public comment about something until it's actually been kind of verified. And the way that I verify it is by looking at alternative sources, usually Telegram, usually Twitter is a really good source for news, and because it's coming from individuals themselves, right? It's not coming from a mainstream outlet. And then it's also sometimes in Twitter and also on Telegram as well, people inject their opinions into it as well. Oh, look at this guy, he's doing this, or look at this girl, she's doing that, whatever it is, right? And they'll inject their opinion, and that'll help you to kind of go, that's not what the mainstream is saying. Someone else is giving you a slightly different perspective, an unbiased perspective, just their personal perspective. So for me, I try and trust and verify what I'm seeing, but I also just give myself a little bit of space and time. And sometimes to your point, Ed, I just don't comment at all on things that don't matter. You know, talking about the subject matter of the Jim Caviezel movie and The Sound of Freedom, that's the name of the movie, talking about that subject matter and talking about what's going on there, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't matter. It's a movie I definitely will watch. It's definitely something I want to see, but that's not something that I want to talk about in a public forum for a bunch of different reasons, right? And first of all, I don't know anything about it, and I can't formulate an opinion about it. So there's so many things out there that make you feel a little bit of angst and maybe sometimes a bit of outrage as well. And the way that I handle that personally is I look at it and go, well, does it affect me? No. 99% of what we talk about in our day-to-day activity is just completely irrelevant. It doesn't affect us. But it is the way that you and I get our entertainment, because we like society, we like culture, and we like knowing how the world works. And you just got to be careful in all of that you don't trip over yourself and get tangled up in deep state mainstream media stuff, because it's just not true. And 99% of people in the last couple of years got tangled up in deep state and mainstream media, and they followed the rules and they did their part. And it was all false. It was all completely wrong. And they lied to you and you got tangled up in it because you believed it, because you didn't apply your critical thinking. So the way not to become an instrument of deep state, just give it some time, because that was the solution to that. Why would I go and do something like that now? Why wouldn't I just wait? I'm at no threat. I don't go anywhere. I don't see anyone. I'm not going to get sick. It's all good. What about you, Ed? Bring it home for us, mate, and let's close it out with this one.
Yeah, well, the single biggest thing that people can do to guard against, we'll call it programming out there by the deep state, right, is to seek out multiple sources. And over the course of time, you're going to settle on sources that you trust. And I'd encourage you to find sources that back up what they're saying with facts, and look at the reputation of the person giving you that news. Did that person have a history of making accusations that are later proven false, or did that person have a history of backing up everything he says with facts? It's not that hard to find a small number of trusted sources to look at. And this is where we go back to being a discerning consumer of news, right? And the two words I throw in is critical thinking. Develop your critical thinking skills. Now, actually, my concern out there is that too many people might take the attitude of, well, it doesn't concern me, so I don't, why should I care? I'm actually worried about that, because there are issues. If I talk about the decline of the U.S. dollar, people say, well, what do I care? It doesn't affect me. Well, you know what? It does. You might not think it does, but it does. So bear with me while I tell you why it does. So I'd encourage people, be a little open-minded in that regard. Stretch yourself a little bit, challenge yourself a little bit. This, when you see people out there talking about a serious topic, like sometimes I do videos that are pretty substantial and they're 20 minutes, 30 minutes long. But in that 20-minute, 30-minute period, I'm going to be teaching you some really important stuff. Every once in a while, take a half hour of your life and invest it in watching a good substantive video on something that you don't particularly know about. But then you might realize that, this is important stuff to know. We have a phrase out there in every election cycle called low information voters, right? People who don't know anything, and those people are easily persuaded, right? Well, I don't want our audience to be low information voters or low information people, period. I mean, people don't tune in to us to hear the latest sports scores. We're talking about pretty important stuff. So hopefully our audience has faith that we did a pretty good job of picking a topic that is relevant to everyone. And so as a starting point, just trust us that we picked a good one, and just, bear with us, humor us for 10, 15 minutes, and hopefully we'll make a point that'll ring true to you.
Well said. Well said. Nice way to round it out today. Ed, I just want to remind the audience that we're available as a podcast over on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and make sure you come on over and follow us on Twitter. And don't forget to join the Telegram channel as well. All of the links are down below in the description. Let's wrap this one up and see you next time. It's bye for now.
Bye.